Very much. I express my gratitude to Sylvia for the invitation, and to Villanova, and to the political science department, especially Mr. Lowell, for the invitation. I feel at home in Villanova, and the students have been nice to me. People stop me. I see my picture everywhere. People stop me like, you are the guy in the picture or whatever. And I've been welcomed in classes. I taught some classes. I really feel at home, I mean, really in Villanova, and I'm really grateful to that. Now, the topic is about the challenges of democratic transition in Tunisia. And I think this topic is interesting to anybody curious about the Arab world in general, anybody curious about the Islamic world or the Muslim world, and especially anybody who is seriously curious about democracy itself. We have received in Tunisia several scholars and academics who are political scientists who are specialized in the study of democracy, and it seems it should be a very interesting destination now, because if anybody is really interested by the transition from dictatorship to democracy, that's the right place to be. I mean, when I talk about the Tunisian Revolution, I use the present perfect myself. I'm surprised when people use the past tense, saying the revolution occurred in 2000. The revolution is still going on. So when we talk about, if we're really serious about a revolution, that is a radical, fundamental transformation, it is still going on, and it will go on for some time. So it is a very challenging and exciting place to be. Since we can't really go all to Tunisia today, we brought Tunisia to this classroom, and I'm talking to you about it as not only as a commentator, but also, as Sylvia said, as an actor, if you want, or as a witness of that revolution. So my presentation is divided into the following ideas. Where is that? So the Tunisian exceptionalism, that's what I'm starting with. To me, it's not an accident that the Arab Spring started in Tunisia. It's not by no means an accident. There are objective reasons for that, and I'm trying to briefly introduce that. Why did all these events start in Tunisia? Why not in Yemen? Why not in Saudi Arabia, for that matter? So why Tunisia? That's what I'm starting with. Then I'm talking about the context of the Tunisian Revolution. That is when, why, how, etc. I'm talking about its objectives and ideals. I'm describing the originality of the Tunisian Revolution. And then, of course, I'm talking about its means, its process. Then this is part number 2. Then part number 3 will deal with the first transition period from January 14, 2010. That's when the dictator left the country, to the first elections in October 2011. So I'm referring to this period as a period of chaos and hope. So it was really a very emotionally important period. Then I'm moving to the second transition period, which started immediately after the first democratic elections, and which was expected to last for a year, but we are still going on with that period. You see here, October 2011, and it is still going on. So this phase number 2, the second transition period with the Islamists in power, is still going on. The title I'm giving it is the following: Islamists in Power, Hardships and Disillusionments versus Challenges and Indecisions of Revolutionary Times. And then, of course, we finish with Hopes for the Future, Tunisia's Democratic Assets and Chances. Now, Tunisian exceptionalism. Of course, anybody who's a little bit familiar with the Arab world would, of course, people were surprised that revolution started in Tunisia or in the Arab world. But anybody familiar with that region would agree with this perception, or would agree with this idea of Tunisian exceptionalism. Actually, Tunisia and Tunisians have always been known for their or our moderation, rationality, midway approaches, religious tolerance, cultural tolerance, rejection of extremists, ideologies or whatever. So, and this is really pretty exceptional in that part of the world. So this is not accidental again. Why is Tunisia exceptional today? Why are Tunisians so tolerant? Why are Tunisians so modern? Why are Tunisians so progressive? I see several reasons for that. One of them is history. Tunisia has got a 3,000 years long history. This history was characterized by several successive civilizations which sometimes coexisted. So Tunisia has been, if you want, a meeting place of diverse cultures. Going on, this process has been going on for 3,000 years. And you can see all the cultures we've had in 3,000 years. So it's not a lesson of history, but these are the successive civilizations we had. You know, we had Berbers as indigenous civilization, and we still have some Berbers left in Tunisia. The first foreign visitors were Punics and Phoenicians from the 9th century BC until the 2nd century BC. This is the great civilization of Carthage, of Elis. These are the people who brought us, this is the great Hannibal civilization. These are the people who brought us the olive tree. So I talk about that in the next event. Then the Roman civilization, from the 1st century BC until the 5th AD. The Romans turned Carthage into the second richest in the whole Roman Empire, and it was really an impressive civilization. The Vandals, that's from the 5th until the 6th. The Byzantines, the Christian Tunisia, that's from the 6th century until the 7th century. The building, I have my office in a building referred to as Augustine office, I think, yeah, or building. Well, I'm surprised that many people working in that building don't really know that Augustine is one of the icons of Tunisia's history. And so we have at least something in common, Villanova and Tunisia. And if you go to Carthage today, you still, some of you went already there, you still see the St. Augustine church in there. So if you look into the history of Tunisia's icons, St. Augustine symbolizes the Christian part of Tunisia. That's the Byzantine era. Then, of course, we had the Arabs come in the 7th century, and until today, so they came in. They are the only people who came and never left. So I don't know whether this is good or bad. I'm a scholar, I have to be objective. But the Arabs came in the 7th century in 670, and they are still there. Then, of course, we had the Spanish ruling us for a very short time. Tunisia was also part of the great Ottoman Empire during 300 years, from 1774. I didn't precise it there, but from 1774 until 1957. Tunisia was under French domination between 1881 and 1956. Tunisia obtained its independence in 1956, and the modern Tunisian Republic was founded on July 25th, 1957. What does this mean? This means that this country's 3,000 years history this is like a training in cultural tolerance. That is, we've had several civilizations coming in, and as I said, coexisting for some time. The language I speak today is Tunisian. Some people might ask me what Tunisian is. Probably this lady wouldn't, because she's fluent in Tunisian. But some people come, like this gentleman who speaks standard Arabic. He came into Tunisia trying to practice his Arabic, but it was unsuccessful since we speak Tunisian in Tunisia. And Tunisian is very symbolic. It symbolizes the complexity of our, I was talking about, of these diverse civilizations. Tunisian is made of Arabic, French, Berber, Italian, Spanish, and Turkish. Did I forget anything? Okay. The word, I don't want to give you example now. I mean, we could have this some other time. But the language we speak symbolizes this diversity we have and this tolerance we have. So that's the first reason I see justifying this exceptionalism. The second reason which is linked to the first one, which is the geography of Tunisia. Some people don't really know where Tunisia is. I had somebody last week, a student, a political science student I happened to have lunch with. He said, I'm sorry, I listened to your course, I like that, but can you tell me where you come from exactly, because it was very brief as a name. I said, Tunisia, where is that exactly? I told him, listen, it's in North Africa. He said, I'm sorry, but you don't look very African. I mean, I got his point. I told him, really, I mean, and that's not the first time it happened to me. I mean, I had this, and I'm not the only one. Many Tunisians have had this experience. So that's why I added this map here, okay? So this is where Tunisia is. This is North Africa. And as you see, Tunisia is at the center of the Mediterranean. That's the reason why Tunisia has been attractive to all these civilizations, okay? We have no oil in Tunisia. That's why you guys in America never hear about us, okay? We have no oil in Tunisia. We have no natural resources. We have, but in the pre-nuclear age, Tunisia used to be strategically very important. As you see, it's in the center of the Mediterranean. exactly in the middle between Egypt and Morocco, etc. And this, I call it carrefour of civilizations, that is a meeting place of civilizations, has really participated in this exceptionalism. The other reason, of course, and the main reasons have got to do with the contemporary Tunisia. Tunisia, as I said, was founded in '57, the modern Tunisian Republic. We had the chance, we were blessed to have a very progressive president at the very beginning, who was influenced, this is Mr. Habib Bourguiba, who was influenced by the Enlightenment. He was a student in Paris in the 1920s, and he came back home with impressed by the Enlightenment spirit, if you want, or mentality or political thought in Europe at the time. So what are the distinctive characteristics of contemporary Tunisia? One is a high level of education. This is very important compared to many other countries in the region, even compared to our closest neighbors. In 1957, the first modern Tunisian government took an important decision which would really have an impact today or later on. In '57, our first government decided to offer free compulsory education to everybody. This is very important because Tunisia is a poor country, remember. And Tunisia was, or has since then, been devoting 1/3 of its budget to education. I'm not sure, and correct me if I'm wrong, if that there's any other country in the world devoting so much to education. So I haven't had anybody correct me so far, because I speak in several places. So 1/3 of Tunisia's budget devoted to education, that's important. So, and we have this, as I said, compulsory but free education. My students back home are not rich. So that's why this explains the huge number of students we have. And you might tell me, what's the link? Why, I mean, in a speech about the Tunisian Revolution, I mean, the Tunisian Revolution was conducted by highly educated people, by highly educated, I mean, young people. So this high level of education has really, I mean, prepared, or if you want, paved the ground, or has created a sophisticated level of political discourse and a kind of an aspiration to democracy. The second really exceptional characteristic, and that's part of the word, has got to do with our emancipated women. Again, taking you back to Habib Bourguiba in 1957. Habib Bourguiba in '56 was prime minister. He became president when Tunisia became a republic in '57. In 1956, he imposed the Code of the Personal Status. The Code of the Personal Status was a revolutionary code in that part of the world. I'm briefly mentioning that. It outlawed polygamy. There are 2 Muslim countries in the world where polygamy is outlawed today. Do you know the other country? I guess most of you would know, yeah? The other country is Turkey. These are the only 2 countries where polygamy is outlawed. And in Turkey it was also imposed by Ataturks, or by like people would rather say today in a dictatorial way. Okay, so Habib Bourguiba did the same. He imposed that Code of the Personal Status. It outlawed polygamy. It limited marriage age to 17 at that time to girls or to women. Today it's 18. It imposed civil marriage and civil divorce. Later on in the 60s, women would get more rights, like this free abortion. I'm surprised that people still debate the question of abortion in some countries today. In Tunisia, we settled that in the 60s. It's done, and we don't go back to that. The equal pay, that probably some women in France and in Germany in public spheres still don't have this equal pay. In Tunisia, I'm a guest in this country, please, Sylvia. So I'm a guest in the United States, so come on. So, women have enjoyed that equal pay, I mean, since the 60s, etc. So what's the point? The point is that today, in 2013, 60% of university students are girls. Today, in this revolutionary process, women are at the front. Today we have a society which is not handicapped. That is, we don't have only half of society moving, we have all of society moving. And it's really surprising, but when you see images, and you already see images, this is 1957. This is how Tunisian women looked like in 1957, and this is Habib Bourguiba. These are girls in the Tunisian Revolution. These pictures were taken on January 14th, the day Ben Ali left, and he left because these people were a threat to him. Okay, so this is a pretty recent picture. This is what we call Revolution 2 in Tunisia, because we still, in Tunisia, revolution is like a permanent process, and we spend the whole summer like protesting, etc. So this is a very new picture. I wanted to add it because people really, as I said, use the past tense talking about the revolution, but we are still in the streets. I mean, my colleagues back home and my students and whatever, they're still in the streets protesting, and we call it back home Revolution 2, and I'm coming back to that, okay? There's a figure I have somewhere which is surprising to some of you. Women make up 24% of the Constitutional Assembly today. This is more than the percentage of women in many democracies. Okay. Again, I'm not mentioning the U.S. Sylvia, but even though it is more than women than in the American Congress, but it's the same for France, for example, for Britain. So 24%, that's the percentage of women in the Constitutional Assembly. But the point is that women in Tunisia are emancipated. They fight for their freedoms. They fight for their rights, and they are really at the front. And that's really exceptional in the Arab and Muslim world. There's absolutely no doubt about that. The third element has got to do with middle class. In spite of the corruption of the previous regime, in spite of the authoritarian manners, etc., it had economic successes. Of course, in Tunisia, most people wouldn't say that today, because in Tunisia we're going through a revolutionary process. So we are destroying everything the previous regime did. Okay, historians would know this. This is a revisionist period. So we destroy everything that used to be perfect like a few years ago, probably a few years from now, people would be more like balanced and come back to evaluate the dictatorial period and would really highlight the economic successes. One of the economic successes is that it managed to build a solid middle class. The figures would differ, but we see that about 70% of Tunisians are middle class. How is that? Of course, this is an exception in the developing world. Of course, this is an exception in the Arab and Muslim world. But how is that important to our topic today? When you're middle class, your priorities are no longer bringing food to the table. When you're middle class, your priorities are personal property, your priorities are freedom, are democracy, whatever. So it's a question of priorities. In some countries, people are rather very submissive because people are busy bringing food to the table. Okay, that's not the case for Tunisia, and that's really part of that exceptionalism. Another impact has got to do, or another element has got to do with the homogeneity of Tunisian society. All of you are familiar with ethnic, religious clashes in the Muslim and Arab world. Well, in Tunisia, I would say that we're blessed that we have a very homogeneous society in terms of culture and religion. 99% of Tunisians are Sunni, Muslims, and Arabs. So we don't have these divisions between, like in some countries, between Shia and Sunni, between Berbers and Arabs, so we don't have this kind. There are some countries with, and you see that in Iraq, for example, or in Lebanon, or in plenty of other countries. Ethnicity or religion can be a source of conflict. So Tunisia is very harmonious. We have our conflicts, which are cultural, but we are discovering them now. And we have like social disparities, but in terms of cultural and, in terms of religious and ethnic harmony, Tunisia is an exception in the whole Arab world. The final element that I've never seen anywhere, which has got to do with the impact of tourism. I'm always surprised that people talk about tourism in Tunisia as a source of foreign income. That's the only context in which people talk about tourism. I live in a city which has received tourists since the early 60s. And I worked in tourism. I've been working in tourism since I'm 15 or 16. And tourism has had a very serious cultural impact on the way Tunisians think, because we socialize with tourists. Because we go out with tourists, because tourists come into our houses, because we get to tourist houses. And most tourists in Tunisia are Western. Most tourists in Tunisia are European. So this daily interaction between Tunisians and Arab population, and then the Germans and the British and the British and the French, whatever. So this interaction, this socializing on a daily basis has had a very serious impact, not only on superficial things like the way we dress or the way we, or the way we speak, whatever, but also it has brought this tolerance element. Tunisians are no longer shocked by differences because differences have been living with us since the 60s, and that's really very important. I mean, one of the elements which justify this exceptionalism is tourism. Sometimes, you know, in this part of the world, people study the Arab world in general like that, or the Islamic world, and people rarely look into the differences within the Arab world, but these differences are huge. And take the example of Tunisia compared to its neighbors, Libya and Algeria. We have absolutely nothing in common. And the reasons are those I mentioned now, and tourism is one of them. Okay, so this is my first part about exceptionalism in Tunisia. Now let's come to the revolution, and let's start with its context, the political, economic, and social context in December 2010. How was the context like? You know, the revolution was sudden. It surprised everybody. If we had to fly back in time now, how did Tunisia look like in December 2010? Politically, we had, there's no question about that, a dictatorial regime. We had a theocracy with all what that means. That is, it's hard for me to go back to that, but I don't want to go back to that. But politically, we had a one-party system. We had, you know, the big brother watching you think, like the picture everywhere. We had, most Tunisians were depoliticized. Most Tunisians were lost their illusions. Most Tunisians didn't care, didn't talk about politics. It was hard to talk to students at that time about democracy, whatever, because they knew that it was a joke in Tunisia. Of course, there is a minority concerned. There were a number of political opponents in the country. There was a strong civil society. Civil society has always been powerful and strong in Tunisia. In the campuses, we were always politicized. I come from a college of human sciences, and it's very politicized. People have always been talking about politics. Students, to be fair, even during dictatorship times, always had the freedom to criticize the regime, the government, whatever, but they were considered as marginal intellectuals. Nobody hears them anyway, so they are in the campus, they cry, they protest, let them do it as long as they don't come out. So in the city, most people were disillusioned. We could not even speak openly about politics in cafes, whatever. I mean, you could not express your perspectives. You would do it like in private, but in public forums, you could not openly criticize anything in the regime. The press was censored. I mean, I don't need to highlight that Tunisia was, of course, a totally, it was a theocracy. There's no doubt about that. Economically, as I said, I'm repeating myself, we have a solid middle class, but we also have a kind of disparities between a very wealthy minority and the rest. Widespread corruption, there's no doubt about that. So, but the key word is that Tunisians had no concern. Tunisians are known for being the bon vivant, that is, people who want to enjoy life, go out, have a drink in here, spend time in cafes, whatever. But talking about politics, that's something that most Tunisians never cared about. And I haven't lived here when I was a PhD student a long time ago, haven't lived in another democracy, France. You notice that. You notice that you live in a dictatorial regime because nobody talks politics. Everybody talks football. I mean, our football. Everybody talks soccer. Really, not. And that was really very intellectually. It was very boring. Intellectually, living in Tunisia during the dictatorship years, it was really very, very boring. Now, Mohamed Bouazizi. Some of you know the name. This is the guy. This is what he did. This is the hero. People. In the American Congress made a standing ovation for Mohamed Bouazizi. They glorified him. Well, that's fine. Some articles glorify the guy, the gentleman. There is in Paris like Mohamed Bouazizi Street. There is somewhere in the United States, I don't know where, a Mohamed Bouazizi statue, whatever. I read it, I don't know where. That's great. But this is more like the myth, or this is more like the legend. The guy wasn't specially educated, wasn't especially politicized. The guy, we now know that he happened to be drunk when he did this, okay? But of course, so we have to, we have to keep the myth. It's like talking about the American founding fathers. Very few people would insist that some of them were slave owners, for example. We don't insist on that. The same for this guy. But anyway, he was like the spark. He was like the flame. That's when things started. But during the early days and months and weeks of the revolution, people were glorifying him. Mohamed Bouazizi, the hero, he really, he's the cause for that. He led to the downfall of the dictator, etc. But as I said, this gentleman accidentally caused the revolution, if you want. Okay, he was desperate, he was poor, he had a couple of drinks, then he decided simply to commit that suicide, etc. But as I said, I wanted simply to mention that because I read still even in articles here, Mohamed Bouazizi, he's like glorified, but he accidentally started the Tunisian revolution. But that's it. Revolutions need myths, need symbols, and Mohamed Bouazizi, this gentleman, happened to be the symbol, and that's why he is a symbol. That's what he did. Okay. But now let's move on to, where is my stuff? It's here. To the real causes of the revolution now. Of course, there are social causes for this revolution. You should know that Tunisia is a country of paradoxes, regional disparities. There are two Tunisias, and those who lived in Tunisia or visited Tunisia would know this. There is one Tunisia by the coastline, which is rather quite prosperous, and there is one Tunisia in the hinterland, which is very desperate. So probably the most important reason or cause behind the events going on in Tunisia is that. Because the Tunisian revolution started in the hinterland. The Tunisian revolution never started in the big cities. So regional disparities, that's really, I describe Tunisia sometimes as a schizophrenic country. There are two Tunisias. There is one way of life in the coastline, and there is another way of life in the hinterland. There is, and this is not new. This started, I mean, centuries ago. You know, when by the coastline you have ports, you interact with the rest of the world. You have investment, you have infrastructure. In the hinterland, you have, it's basically a farming culture. Young people are not interested by that. You don't have, I mean, investment in there. So this regional disparities, that's really one of the social features characterizing Tunisia, and nothing changed until now, okay? So social marginalization, of course. The people living in the hinterland, they were socially marginalized. They had a hatred of the regimes because they put the blame on politicians. You spend money in the cities. You invest in the cities. The best schools are in the cities. The best hospitals are in the cities. The work and opportunity. Tourists are in the cities. We would like to see some tourists. We would like, but tourists wouldn't go to these places. I mean, we would like to see some investment, but there are even no highways taking people there. So we do have a structural problem in Tunisia, and this social marginalization is really one deep social feature behind this revolution. Then a higher unemployment rate, of course. That's the problem number one in Tunisia economically. We have a very high unemployment rate. In 2010, the unemployment rate was officially 14%. These were the regime's figures, but the real figure was about 25%. That's a lot. That's a lot. 25%, that's huge. I think in the US now it's about 6%, or am I wrong? It's a little bit more. Is it 6, 7, 8, 8? Oh, and that's a lot. 25% in Tunisia in 2010. So that's the unemployment rate. And the problem is that we have many educated, I mean, people who are, I mean, jobless. That's very serious. You go to college, you devote years, I mean, of your life hoping for the best, and then you come out, you graduate, you come out, and you wait, and you sit for an interview, and you wait, and people, whatever, and jobs never come. And you know, when you have no job, you have no dignity. You have no, at least in that part of the world. So unemployment, that's really a serious issue behind the revolution. Social disparities, that's another feature. I mean, some people got crazily rich in Tunisia. This is one of the negative features of globalization. Probably sometime I'll be talking about the impact of globalization in Tunisia, and it's a very positive impact. I don't belong to the intellectuals who are anti-globalization. I don't believe into that, okay? But I believe that also some people got very rich during this transition from state-owned business into privatization. Some people got very rich, and they happen to be the presidents, the former presidents, like in-laws, nephews, nieces, mistresses, whatever. So it was like a corrupt minority holding everything. And we were, I mean, they were showing off their wealth. And you see people, I mean, driving crazy cars or owning crazy things. So while others were desperate and especially in the hinterland, so social disparities, that's a very serious problem. Then political causes are clear. I mentioned that. We have a corrupt regime, lack of freedoms, big brother watching you as I put here, with everything that stands. People could not speak freely, the media were censored or self-censored, etc. What were the objectives and ideals of this revolution? Why is this important now? Because we are evaluating the performance of the regimes now. And one way to evaluate is to check out whether the current government has met the objectives of the Tunisian Revolution or not. So the Tunisian Revolution had social, economic, and political objectives. The Tunisian Revolution had no cultural objectives, had no religious objectives. I need to insist on that. I attended a conference yesterday talking about the Iranian Revolution, and these are two different sets of revolutions. The Tunisian one had socio-economic objectives and political objectives. What are the social objectives? Of course, social equality. We need more justice. We need, of course, a better distribution of wealth. We need, of course, we need to do something about corruption. The system is not working somewhere. Something is stuck somewhere. So we need to do something about this, given an equal opportunity to different regions in the country. We need to do something to reduce regional disparities. We need jobs. We need dignity. I mean, it's not too much asking. I mean, the Tunisian Revolution had clear objectives, socio-economic objectives, which are these: social equality, equal opportunities, reduction of regional disparities, employment opportunities, dignity. I don't think that you have you would see any cultural or any religious requests in there. Then political objectives, of course: dismantle autocracy, freedom, democracy, modernity. So I, as Sylvia said, happened to participate in that revolution. I was one of the people marching against Ben Ali. That's the name of the ex-president. I still, you know, when you participate in these events, you don't, these are things that live with you forever. And now we still talk about that, because the people who were marching against the previous regime, we still meet, since we are still in the streets. We haven't seen anything change, so we are the same faces, still marching and protesting, and we are taking part in what we call revolution too. I remember the slogans very well. The slogans were, very modernist, if you want. The slogans were universal. The slogans had to do with anti-corruption, more freedoms, anti-censorship, more justice, more egalitarianism. So, these are the slogans that any group of American protesters would have in the streets. They're not surprising slogans, but it's important to mention that, because, as I said, today the debate in Tunisia has turned, or has taken a different orientation. What were the means used? This was really a unique revolution. When you think of revolutions, oh my God, what did I do? Why am I calling this a unique revolution? You know, I personally grew up reading about some revolutions. I don't know, I read about many Vietnamese, Chinese, Iranian, Marxist things in Cuba, etc. Well, this Tunisian revolution is unique. I'm calling it personally. I'm biased if you want. But I'm calling it the first modern revolution of the 21st century. The first real modern revolution. Why that? This is a leaderless revolution. No leaders. That is, it was a spontaneously popular revolution. This is a partyless revolution. There is no political party behind it. An ideology-less revolution. There's no ideology. No communism, no socialism, no capitalism, no Islamism, no whatever. So that's why I'm calling it, I'm referring to it as a unique revolution, simply because it was a different kind of revolution. It was rather based on popular requests, and it was rather, or it is rather quite spontaneous. So what were the means used? You probably, or you surely read about the revolutions in the United States in the 60s. I taught a course about the 60s, probably the best course I enjoyed teaching. And you are familiar with the Martin Luther King style of militancy. It was based on sit-ins, marches, protests, civil disobedience, etc. That's what we had in Tunisia. The Tunisian revolution is 99% peaceful. That is, it's based on marshes. That's what we enjoy doing. Actually, now I meet everybody only in marshes. So it's I don't see them anywhere. Well, really, especially this summer, because we had like daily meetings. I see you then. Then would mean we meet downtown Sousse at 9 o'clock. That's when I see everybody. So I personally go there. I'm sure that I'm meeting all my colleagues or friends, whatever, because this is how the Tunisian Revolution has been working. Peaceful marches and protests, but very emotionally conducted ones, not futile. Slogans, modern slogans, sit-ins in universities, etc. Strikes. I mean, that's what that's what makes it rather quite peaceful, as I said. Why is it a modern revolution? This revolution was largely successful thanks to social networks. Remember that we had a dictatorial regime. Remember that the media was either censored or self-censored. So how did we know about the events going on? Because remember, chronologically, the revolution started in the hinterland. Mohamed Bouazizi is from Sidi Bouzid, that's in the south, or center-south. How did we in the big cities? And 2/3 of Tunisians live in the cities by the coastline. The media were still glorifying the regime, talking about the successes of the regime. So how did we know about that? What mobilized all Tunisians were bloggers. I call it the Facebook revolution, if you want. I never had a Facebook account personally before. I had one during these events, because that was the only source of information. So young bloggers, and they look like any one of you here. So they went to these places. They were filming the events. They were filming the reaction of the government, because the government had a very stupid way, dealt with these events in a very stupid way. The government used extreme radical violence against people who were peacefully marching. When people march, what should you do? I'm not here to give advices to dictators. Let them march. They want to talk. Let them talk. They are 10,000, 100,000. They're marching. But when you start using violence, and when you use the extreme form of violence, when you assassinate people, nobody is going to forgive that. And that's exactly what happened. We had images, we had photos, thanks to Facebook, thanks to, as I said, the social networks. And of course, during these days, which were very hot days, hot in the sense like very exciting days, the bloggers were coordinating, and they were doing a great job. They were purchased by the police, but they were doing an excellent job. Of course, also the slogans used. I don't know whether I've shown you pictures or not yet, but there are the slogans used. I don't know whether you can look at the slogans young people were using in Tunisia. Game is over. Globalization, yeah? That's why I say globalization is great. Power to the people. I mean, this is Tunisia. This is not Washington, D.C., whatever, okay? Yes, we can. Anyway, of course, I didn't make any selective choice of pictures, okay? This is the Ben Ali's picture, Big Brother watching you, freedom. This is the famous slogan of the revolution. Do you know what dégage would mean? No, it's rather like that. Dégage would rather mean get away. If you're a dictator, if you're a big brother watching us, and you have people starting in the hinterland and then joining in the city, that's what made the difference. Because it's not the first time we had protests in the poor areas. In the poor areas, the people protesting had social and economic motivation. In the big cities, we're not desperate. So, and we are the larger number, 2/3 of Tunisians living there. The people marching in the cities are middle class and upper middle class people. Usually when we think of revolutions, we think of desperate people protesting. No, so we're not desperate, but we were marching, and that's what also made the difference, because the requests were different. The requests were, as I said, modern and modernist, and they had to do with democracy, etc. And the slogans are surprising. I remember when I was marching against Ben Ali, I was observing people. They were all young. I mean, they were all like familiar faces. Most people, we should not idealize revolutions. Revolutions, I believe, are elitist by definition. That is, you always have a minority concerned by conducting it. Of course, usually the minority conducting the revolution never profits from it, usually. And that's the case in Tunisia now. But I still remember, I told you, I have images. When we were marching against Ben Ali, I was looking into the faces. These were either former students I had, or current students, teachers, lawyers, I mean, very educated people and very young people with a large percentage of women. That's really remarkable. At the time when most people were observing us, they were sitting in cafes smoking their hookah with H, and they were surprised. What are these people? They didn't believe that it would work. Nobody believed that the peaceful protests would really help us get rid of a regime. But it worked. It worked because there was a national union for the first time. Everybody, all over the country, was standing against dictatorship, against corruption. And also what made the difference was that the army decided to join people's side, which really weakened the position of the previous regime. Okay. Anyway, so dégage would mean go away. Ben Ali finally decided. These are more pictures. This is January 14th again. This is the day the dictator fled. This is a teacher. I don't know what he teaches, but it's a famous picture. Like you see, I mean, the defiance. I don't know whether my word in English is in his face. These are the people protesting Ben Ali, and this is a symbol. The Tunisian flag. Tunisia is like in a cage. And then look at the police. I mean, why do you do that to people? I mean, why? I mean, if people are marching, it's really stupid. I believe that regime was really totally stupid. I mean, look at these people. Are these scary people? I mean, what would they do? They march, they protest, Ben Ali dégage. So, you...
It's very typical of regimes to have that kind of fear.
Yes, yeah. You know, I personally decided to join, to participate. That's not usually my type. I don't usually, I'm more like an intellectual. I don't physically participate. I decided to do that because when I saw images of regimes shooting people, I told people around me the guy wouldn't make it, I mean, he wouldn't last more than a month. Because when you shoot people, this means that you're fragile, that you are no longer solid. This means that you are no longer confident. And that's what happened. Anyway, on January 14th, 2011, less than a month after the suicide of Bouazizi, Ben Ali left the country. And that's the success of phase one of the Tunisian Revolution. The dictator leaves the country. Then we move to the first phase, the first transition period, January 14th, that's when Ben Ali left, to October 23rd, that's when we had our first elections. This was a very special time. This was an exciting time, but a scary time. That's why I'm calling it chaos and hopes. All of a sudden, we had, you know what the dictatorship is. The government is occupying all spaces. That is, the government is everywhere. And this is a police state we're talking about. That is, in every roundabout in Tunisia, you see 44 policemen. Like when you drive from your house to your working place, you meet like 1,200 policemen on the road. This is not an exaggeration. So, and all of a sudden, that regime collapsed, and the streets were empty. We had no police left anymore. Everybody went back home. I mean, imagine this. Imagine this happening to you here in the US. All of a sudden, for whatever reason, you no longer have any government. Obama goes somewhere. You don't have any police anymore. I mean, that's a scary situation. I mean, we were used to police everywhere, to government presence everywhere. So that was scary. I mean, you would sleep with I was sleeping with my clothes on. And, you know, when you have a family and you know that this is a totally unstable situation, that's a really scary situation. So the political scene during that period was very exciting, that's true. Because we got rid of a dictator, that's great. That wasn't expected so fast. We discovered new freedoms. Internet was no longer censored. Can you believe that YouTube was censored in Tunisia before January 14th? Even YouTube was censored. So all of a sudden, you know, imagine that you had a government occupying everything, then that power went away. It's like a teenager whose parents are suffocating him, then they go on vacation. All of a sudden. And you have all these freedoms. That's what we had. We were even disoriented. You have all this, new media organs coming in, debates going on all the time. Everybody was marching for whatever reason. So it was a very exceptional period. Politically, during this transition period, we had three very weak interim governments. We had no clear visibility. We had an outbreak of violence, political violence mainly everywhere. And especially, as I said, we had an issue of security. We had no police. All of a sudden, the police was guilty. The police was the target of people's protests. So they simply decided, out of shame probably, to go back home. And we were guarding our own houses. We had what we called at that time neighborhood security things, like every night, because we had a curfew during 3 or 4 months. So every night you'll have like the neighbors meeting. Basically, what I remember is that we were talking, having tea and coffee, but we were officially the heroes, like guarding our neighborhoods. Like you have people bringing us some tea, some sweet stuff. Occasionally we would say, oh, there's something going on, let's run. But at least where I live myself in Sousse, we didn't have big issues. But it was a scary time. It was a scary time, in spite of all the hope that it brought, and in spite of a feeling of success we had, and in spite of the glory we had. So this is more like the negative thing. The positive thing is that the public administrations never stopped working. So the regime like collapsed. Ben Ali fled. His in-laws were arrested. Some of his ministers were put in jail. Some of his other ministers were still in government. So it's a weird situation. Who decided that this should go in jail and this should rather govern? I don't know anymore. But the point is that we still had the public administration going on. Nothing stopped in the country. Nothing. We had, as I said, a new kind of non-stop political form of political debates. That is, debates going on. And Tunisians were getting their lesson one in democracy, if you want. We were discovering new faces. People were either in jail or abroad coming back. We had new political faces coming in, new parties. We had even, you know, this story of political parties is weird. I think today in Tunisia, now, in October 2013, we have something like 140-something party. 3 years ago, we had one party and like 3 meetings, okay, or 3 groups. Now we have 140-something party. I come from, as I said, a college of human sciences. There are people I know that is not necessarily friend with, but I teach with. They created like 3 different parties in the same school, really. So and that was part of it. That was part of this new freedom. You know, all of a sudden you're free. You can do. You want to do a party, do your party. You want a rally, organize a rally. You want a new TV, get your new thing. So during this period also we did great things, because the human rights organizations put pressure to free the prisons of political opponents, to stop any form of government's control over mosques, which has happened to be a mistake, to stop any form of censorship, etc. So it was really an exciting time. And of course we were an international attraction. An international destination. Everybody was visiting us. Hillary Clinton was there. The British Prime Minister was there. You were there. She was there. I mean, everybody was. We were like, and people, and you watch TV, you see CNN talking about Tunisia, and CNN didn't even know where Tunisia was before that. And it was a period that, in spite of all the emotion we had, that we can go back to. And really be proud of. Sorry. Of course, the social scene, strikes, non-stop strikes. That's what we had. That is, people had problems. They had no freedom to express themselves. All of a sudden, anybody having any problem anywhere would be protesting. That is, kids at school would have. It was the opportunity. Employees in a factory, whatever, would be striking. A guy who couldn't divorce his wife would be striking. Whatever, anybody who had, really, I mean, it was like a non-stop outbreak of protests, and that's what you do when you have, you know, you didn't drink, like you were in the desert for years, you had no water, and all of a sudden, they give you so much water to drink. What would you do? No, I'm thirsty, but let me be rational, let me be moderate. A bit, one bit after the other. Now you jump into it. Okay, that's what happened in Tunisia. And as I said, that's why that time is really, the first transition period was really an exceptional one. How did it come to an end? The October 23rd elections, Tunisia's first democratic elections. To me personally, there were 2 days which I still don't, would still visit me in my dreams if you want. January the 14th, when we were marching against Ben Ali, I still remember that day because there were some people were talking about snipers which might shoot us, and I felt very. I still feel the emotion because there were many mothers in there, and some of them were friends, some of them you know because they were teachers, and I was pushing them to go back home. because it was risky. What if any one of us gets shot? Your mothers. And I still remember that most of them were telling me that they were there, ready to pay the price for their children, because they were mothers, they were Martian. I don't know why, but this, I still live with that. I still remember that. I still sometimes even have tears in my eyes when I see these people, because they were Martian for the future of their kids. I mean, that's really great. The second day, I still really remember with a lot of emotion, is the first elections day. I happened to be part of the national committee organizing elections. We had the training, we had people from the United Nations coming in. They gave us training during 3 sessions. Then, I mean, I was in an office in a place called El Kantawi, like a neighborhood in Sousse. And we were there like 6 o'clock in the morning, and we opened the doors at 7 o'clock. This day is a remarkable day. People were voting for the first time freely in their life. That is, I had people who were like 75 years old voting and crying. That is, really, you're Americans, you vote, you've always voted, I mean, for ages. But in Tunisia, we always had elections like 99% turnout, and 99% of this 99% of the people who voted would vote for Ben Ali. So you see how exciting our elections were. So I personally know nobody who voted at that time. I know nobody who knows anybody who voted. But still, we had 99%. But this day, we had free. And by all means, because I participated in that, I was a witness, we had really totally free and fair elections. The results were proclaimed in the office. That is, before we went out, we made the results public. So it was really exceptional. But what I remember is that the emotions, people were voting because things were slow. People would queue up during 3 hours. Tunisians are Mediterraneans. People don't queue up during 3 hours in Tunisia. That's not something people do. But they were queuing up during the whole day. I happened to be in an office where the next president of Tunisia voted, and many other people. But what I noticed was the pride, the emotion, and the optimism that people had at the time. Really, people coming in, they were like expressing a kind of signs of joy because they felt Tunisian, they felt citizens for the first time. Okay, and as I said, especially senior people in their 60s and 70s and 80s who came in to vote. I had a guy who told me, I feel Tunisian for the first time. I never felt Tunisian before. So that's great, because this is, I mean, one of the objectives of the Tunisian Revolution, which happened to be met during that famous October 23 day. You see these pictures, people queuing up, people obviously happy about that. And in spite of as I said, it was physically tiring, it was very slow. I personally was there at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we finished counting everything at 2 o'clock. That is 2 o'clock, I don't know how many hours there were. But, and we were all like, we didn't even eat, we were like very careful, counting, recounting, you know. It was a very serious business. But we felt like we were all volunteers, of course. I mean, nobody paid us for that. But we felt part of history. Of course, I personally was very happy until I saw the results the following day. Okay? Because, you know, because I come from a city which is quite, I don't know. Can you say that Sousse is wealthy? Is it wealthy or is it comfortable? Privilege, yes. So El Kantawi, which is even, so when we were counting the results, the party which had 40% of votes at the national level had only 7 out of 600 votes. That is, we had 600 people, had only 7 of them. So it tells you that where I come from. But anyway, when I went back home, I slept because I was tired, and I was very happy. The Islamist party had 7 votes, and the progressive parties were winning. That's great. Okay, I slept. The following day, turned on TV, and was contacting some people. Everybody was depressed. What happened? What's going on? Why are you depressed? Well, the results of Tunisia's first free elections gave us an Islamist party in the lead with 40% of votes. Some of you tell me, how come that after everything you told us about exceptionalism and modernity, whatever, how come that an Islamist party would gain 40% of votes? Well, this is, I would say that they were lucky. Really, as simple as that. Why? Because on October 23rd, we had 140 parties. That is, people would come in, they would have the choice between that famous party they always knew about, that old party they always heard somewhere, that party which has got the reputation of being the victim of the dictator's repression, and all the other parties which are probably progressive, modern, whatever, but they are fragmented. Okay. We told people during the campaign, come together, otherwise you have no chance. Anyway, so this fragmentation of progressive parties helped really, would explain this kind of 40% victory the Islamists had. Also during the campaign, to be honest, they had an excellent campaign. These people have money. Islamists have money. There is like an Islamist Brotherhood organization that you already study about, and these people have money. Qatar has got money. Saudi Arabia has got money. And these people they had an excellent campaign. They went to poor neighborhoods, overpopulated neighborhoods. They were organizing group marriages for some people, group circumcisions for some kids. They were distributing money like that. They had an excellent campaign vis-a-vis the West. That is, they were coming to the US, to Washington, D.C., lobbying, selling that. I'm not saying that it is wrong yet. I'm not saying that yet. But they came to America and they sold the image of a new democratic Islamist party. And they had also a lot of backup from the West as well. Okay. Anyway, the bottom line is that on October 23rd, we had 40% of Tunisians elect or vote for this Islamist party. 40%, that's not a majority. You need 50 plus 1% to have the majority in the Constitutional Assembly. That's why they formed a coalition with two secular parties, and that's how phase 2 started. The second transition period, October 2011, until now, the Islamist-led coalition in power. Well, this is the period going on until now. I just remind you of what we voted for in on October 23. We voted for a constitutional assembly, 217 representatives, for one specific task. They had the task of writing a new constitution in a year. Of course, they had also the responsibility of choosing a government, whether within or from outside. But they were there mainly to write a constitution during a period of a year. A year later, we would have a new constitution and we would organize elections, presidential, congressional, and then we'll move on from the temporary to the stable system with the government going on for 5 years or 4, whatever. Okay, the constitution says. That's what we voted for. Then we had this Islamists in power. There are 3 ways you can evaluate these Islamists. And Marwan, this is good for your course now, since this gentleman is teaching a course about the Arab Spring, and as I told him when I visited his class, it's like teaching the American Revolution in 1775, because you don't know what's going on, you don't know what it would lead to, and that's really brave. The guy, I think he spends the whole night following the news more than I do. But there are 3 ways you use to evaluate this government. Then you have my group of people, the people I belong to, the intellectuals, if you want to call us liberals, the secular, the people who led the revolution, if you want. For these people, the results were a shock. For these people, there is a fear of Islamism. There is an Islamophobia, if you want. There is a fear of an Islamist theocracy. For these people, Islamism and democracy are incompatible. For these people, which is an important section of Tunisian society, Islamism or the Islamists in power, that's a threat to the Tunisian Revolution. And when these people evaluate the performance of this government, they say that it's more corrupt than the dictator. And they say that the system is even worse today. And they say that nothing changed. So, and these people rejected the Islamists since day one because never believed that Islamists were really fit to govern Tunisia. That's one way to look into things. The other way, the opposite way, that is the people in power and their supporters. For them, things are not going well in Tunisia because of the opposition, because of the westernized people, because of the secular, because of the civil society, because of the media. This is the conspiracy theory. We are in power, we govern, but we are not going anywhere because the opposition parties are really, represent an obstacle, because the civil society is an obstacle, because the media are an obstacle. A more moderate way of looking into things would say that these people had no experience to govern, that these people were either in jail for a long time or in exile. So these people were strangers to Tunisia, if you want. These people had also no experience in governing. So that's not easy at all. These people also governing during this period is also very difficult for anybody, whether Islamist or not. I mean, this is a revolutionary time. So the task is huge and delicate, etc. So that's more like a third way to look into things. I, as an academic, would look into things in a different way. I would say, what did they promise to do? What have they done? That's how I evaluate, because we're here into the evaluation of this transition period. What did these people promise to do? Economically or politically, they promised during the campaign an end to corruption. So did they bring an end to corruption or not? Corruption today in Tunisia is more widespread than before. A better governing model, that is transparency. We have less transparency today than during the dictatorship time. This is not an analysis, this is a description. They promise a new modern constitution in a year. We haven't even done half of it. They promise elections after a year. That is, apparently, I wasn't there, but we voted in October 2012. Okay, so even the electoral process has not started. So this is, again, not an analysis, this is description. They promised better governors. But these people, when we look into them, those governing us, I don't know, they look like incompetent, if you want. They look sometimes aggressive. I personally feel, I'm not a member of any political party, but we feel like we Tunisians now are governed by the least competent of us. We're not governed by the best. We're governed by people who are in power simply because they are members of certain political parties. That's why they are in power. Because they were in jail for 10 years. That's why they are in power. Okay? That's not really the best you would expect. Then social performances. They promise, and I don't know why they promised that, because it's a stupid promise. They promised 600,000 jobs in a year. I don't know who can promise that, but the point is that some people believed into that. 40% of Tunisians believed into that. Of course, when I say 40% of Tunisians, you should put it in its perspective. I didn't say that earlier. Half of Tunisians didn't vote. So we are 11 million in Tunisia today. In Tunisia has got 11 million. Voters, those of a voting age, are close to 8 million, and only 1,400,000 voted for the Islamist party. That's why I said they were lucky. So we had less than 50% of a turnout. So just to put it in this results in its perspective. They promised social justice. We haven't seen that. We have seen recurrent economic crises. We have seen an increase in costs of living. They have promised an end to regional disparities. I don't know why they promised that, because they need like 20 years to do something about that. We haven't even seen any highway, even the blueprint of a highway. So that explains the disappointment that we in Tunisia have. And this is, again, not an analysis, this is a description. This is what they promise, and this is what we have today. I think that Tunisia now, during this period, has got a very serious problem with its elite. We have a problem with the political elite. Politicians in Tunisia were surprised by the revolution. They weren't prepared for it. They weren't prepared to govern. They were prepared for this new kind of dynamic system we have. And we have a very serious problem with our political parties and politicians. They bring a lot of stress, they bring a lot of animosity to a country which is already full of stress. Okay, so when we watch TV, and that's all we do now, we believe that we have a problem with the political elite, whether in power or in opposition, and of course there is a widespread impatience and disappointment. Think of the people who started the revolution. Think of the people who are marching because they're desperate, because they have no jobs, because they're marginalized, because they have no dignity. What have they gained so far? What have they? How did they think of the people who had martyrs in their families, who lost members of it? Think of the mothers or brothers who lost members, and they felt that it is something deserved, or something, worth it. Freedom is worth it. The future paradise we'll have is worth it, but so far they haven't got anywhere. You might tell me this is very pessimistic. No, there are positive things now these days. There are plenty of positive things. We have a very dynamic environment. It's a very challenging, exciting, political scene. I mean, it's a permanent revolution. People talk about, I mean, people conduct political debates everywhere you go, everywhere, like in a store, in a cafe, in a classroom. I mean, we have like a kind of enlightenment, if you want, going on in Tunisia. This is good because we moved from a no man's land, if you want, into an everyday involvement with political issues, and that's really very important. We have also, it is very interesting because we are now discovering our cultural differences. Because dictatorship was like putting everybody in the same bag, if you want. Now we discover that we're different. We discover that the modernity we had was imposed by the governments and that some people never believed into it. We discover that Tunisia is a country split between, and that's a culture difference, between progressives, between liberals, between modernists, and between very conservative people. There are signs we see now in Tunisia that are shocking to Tunisians. You know, these religious dresses I see sometimes in Philadelphia, they shocked us. Because we know, you know, the previous regime was very obsessed with secularism. Girls could not wear the veil at school, mosques were controlled, there was no religious presence in any public forum. But we moved from that into a shocking heavy religious presence, and that shocks Tunisia. For many Tunisians, that's the way it should be. For many others, that's alien, that's strange. So we have a cultural difference, and which we are discovering. Of course, I believe that, here I'm coming to the challenges of democratic transition. I believe that this period is very difficult. I believe that a transition from dictatorship to democracy is a huge task. It's all about occupying spaces. The previous regime was occupying all spaces, in government, in mosques, in schools, in civil society, in football teams, whatever. Now, all of a sudden, as we said, that government disappeared, and now we're fighting for spaces. The liberals would like to occupy spaces. The conservatives would like spaces. The religious would like spaces. So, I mean, it's really very challenging. I mean, this competition to occupy spaces is really one of the challenges. Another challenge of this democratic transition has got to do with getting rid of this system itself. Dictatorship is a system. How can you get rid of that system? How can you get rid of corruption? It's not easy. Corruption is like a cancer. How can you get rid of all the components of that corrupt regime? I mean, how can you get rid how can you purify, like a judicial system, for example? How can you distinguish this is a corrupt judge and this is not? I mean, that's really very, how can you purify the police? How can you do that? So it's not, theoretically that's nice. We're going to purify Tunisia. We are getting rid of corruption, but it seems to be a very complicated challenge and task because corruption is everywhere, in the economic sectors, in the industry, in the police, and the judicial system, etc. And it's not easy to do. You should know that democracy is also cultural. Democracy is not only technical, like voting, etc. Democracy is cultural, and one of the challenges is to get this democratic culture. How can we get a democratic culture? I mean, we don't have democracy even within our families in Tunisia. So how would you get, we don't have democracy in our classrooms. I'm not a democratic teacher, I'm very dictatorial teacher. So how, and we grew up with dictatorship. So how can we really, and as I said, this democracy, this freedom surprised us. We were not prepared for it. So this learning a democratic culture or get into it, that's really it's a very slow process because, as I said, the revolution surprised everybody, political parties, civil society, the media, citizens, etc. We're not well equipped for democracy. We are, if you want, in the learning process. We are learning what democracy is. We are moving from freedom to a responsible freedom. This is we are moving from darkness to light, if you want, and this is what's happening in Tunisia now. Tunisia is not a democracy. Tunisia is in the process of becoming one. Tunisia is in a transition from dictatorship, from darkness to light, as I said, and that's not easy at all. That's not easy at all. That's an exceptional task, and it would, take years to do that. So let me finish, because I'm done, with the hopes for the future. So I finish with that, then if you have any question, you're very welcome. So beyond Western media, yes, achievements of the Jasmine Revolution. I did a PhD about the media, the American media. I did a PhD about the media and politics in the United States. I teach about the media. I love that topic. I'm very disappointed with the media in the West. But I'm not surprised by what they're doing. Last week, the Tunisia's president, that nobody knows, neither in Tunisia nor here, was he's president by accident. We didn't vote for him as a president. Anyway, it's another story. He was invited on CNN. Somebody put a film on Facebook. I watched that. And the lady, I don't know what her name is, on CNN, it's a famous name. She was interviewing the gentleman. She said, I don't know, this is CNN. This is a serious network. Tunisia now has finished drafting its new constitution. And now we have moved to a new government. Nothing of all that has happened in Tunisia. This is CNN. And the guy was interviewed, and he speaks fluent English. Didn't even stop her. No, we haven't done that. No, we haven't. We still have the same government. I mean, this is CNN. Let's be serious. When I watch, especially the French networks, they are exaggerating what's going on in Tunisia. They're amplifying, they're simplifying, they're stereotyping. They are scaring people to death. I'm not surprised that news in Morocco scare people. I'm not surprised that news about Tunisian events in Saudi Arabia, or they don't have news in Saudi Arabia, but in these Gulf countries scare Tunisians. Yes, of course, democracy is scary to these people. They want to, they don't want to promote democracy as a model. But I'm surprised when French or American networks stereotype like that, exaggerate. I just came back from Tunisia, a month ago. There is a revolution going on in Tunisia now. There are protests going on, but 90% of Tunisians are enjoying a fantastic life. 90% of Tunisians, we've never had as many tourists in Tunisia as we had this year. This is something that surprised me. We had this year more tourists than ever. Nobody has ever attacked any tourists or any hotel. And nobody has ever gone into women in the cafes, tell them, come here, you're not covered, cover yourself. So there are exaggerations going on. It's true that there is a new element in Tunisia called Islamism and terrorism. That's new. There is a new element of political assassination. That's new. But the blame is to be put on the government, which is not controlling mosques, which is not controlling the jihadi groups, whatever. But that's a political problem. The 6 million tourists we had this year, they had a fantastic time. The Tunisians who don't care about politics, those who are enjoying their life, they're having a fantastic time. And there are positive things that the media don't talk about. Look at what we did in 3 years now. We got rid of a dictator. That's huge. We got rid of a police state. We organized democratic elections. We have now a multi-party system. We have new freedoms. The media are free never before. We have a very dynamic civil society. We have a high militancy. Young people are very engaged. We have, all these components, media and civil society and opposition parties, they're putting pressure on the Islamist party. And this Islamist party has made many concessions. So if democracy would succeed in Tunisia, that's because we are putting pressure on this Islamist party, and this Islamist party has accepted plenty of concessions. What they call a secular in Tunisia. The secular are fighting everywhere. For every single word in the constitution we are fighting. In every spot we are fighting. And there is a kind of national union going on in the country, and this is really impressive. These days, Nahda, that's the ruling party, accepted to resign from power, and they accepted to a government of technocrats which would supervise new elections. That's great. That's what you hoped for. So what are the chances for the future? What are Tunisia's democratic assets first? I would say that the capacity to find compromises and consensus, that's very Tunisian. We are able to find consensus. We are able to impose or to find compromises even with the Islamist party. Even the Islamist party can forget about the big Islamic Brotherhood agenda and rather adopt the Tunisian one. They're able to do that. We have, and the next steps are clear. Once we finish the constitution, we have elections, and we can't trick elections in Tunisia anymore. That's not possible anymore. And once we move on to a stable system, like this government going on for 5 years, I think we'll have much more stability. Tunisia's assets are its youth. Tunisia's assets are its educated youth. Tunisia's assets are its women. Tunisia's assets is its intelligentsia. We have competent people, whether living in Tunisia or abroad. I don't think that Tunisia's democratic achievements would be likely to be reversed in the future. I don't think this would happen. I don't think that Tunisians would give up the freedoms they obtained. I don't think that I believe that the Tunisians would come out with their own model of democracy. I believe personally, as a teacher involved with political science issues, that democracy is not like a Western idea that is universal and can be imposed all over the world. I'm surprised when some presidents talk about promoting democracy in that region or that region. Democracy is not something, I believe, but I can be wrong, that is universal. It's a universal recipe. You can apply it everywhere. I believe that Tunisians would cook their own democracy, if you want, with their own flavor. So Tunisians are designing their own democracy, and I hope successfully so. I think that Tunisian experience has already shattered a myth, saying that Arabs and democracy cannot meet or are incompatible. I think we are destroying that myth. That's all.